Oh. No, I think it's this one. Okay, here we go. So why is everyone fighting us, I ask. If they're still loyal, they could overpower the commanders easily. But why should they, he retorts, shrugging loudly. Because it's what someone loyal to the Emperor would do, I reply. It seems obvious to me. I don't get it, he adds. I can see Cage's point of view. Why do you think they are rebels? Asks Oriel, looking at us. Well, you, the Colonel, everyone says they are, answers Lauren, nodding towards the Inquisitor and Schaefer. My point exactly, agrees Oriel with a wry smile. You know they are rebels because you've been told they are rebels. And the Typhons have been told that we are the traitors, I add, realizing what Oriel is saying. For all we know, they could be right. But we trust the Colonel. We don't decide who the enemy is. We just follow orders and kill. Kill who we've been told to kill. And so do they, finishes Oriel, glancing back down the Axis tunnel. So that's the reason why this rebellion at the sector command is so dangerous and must be dealt with. Lauren follows on. If they wanted to, the command staff could convince admirals and colonels across the sector that anyone they say is the enemy. The command staff will say that any force that moved against them was rebelling against the Emperor. It is one of the reasons, yes, confirms the Colonel. Our thoughts on the perils of the chain of command are interrupted by more lasbolts flashing across the door. Some of them have sneaked up through the bodies, the Colonel tells us before another look outside. More are moving forward. Cunning bastards, curses Laurie. Kneeling beside me, bolter ready. Return fire, orders the Colonel, leveling his bolt pistol through the door and firing off a couple shots. The firefight continued sporadically for the best part of another hour. There's no telling how many Typhons worked their way through the tunnel, skulking amongst the mounds of dead, almost perfectly camouflaged by the piles of uniformed corpses. I haven't fired a shot in a while. We're beginning to get seriously concerned about the ammunition supplies, and every bolt or last shot has to count. The Typhons, on the other hand, are quite happy to blaze away at the first sign of one of us poking a head or gun into the view. I'm lying prone on the right side of the doorway, with Laurie crouched over me. On the far side are the Colonel and Lauren, while Oriel and Stridon are sheltering behind a panel of controls and dials almost directly opposite the entrance. A shuddering gasp from Gudman's attracts our attention, and I look back to see him staggering away from the terminal. At the further side of the chamber, the neural plug whipping back from his skull. Have you done it? Demands the Colonel. Do you hear any warning klaxons, Colonel Schaefer? He rasps back irritably. I've set up blocks and traps so that the overload process can only be rectified from this room, not from another terminal. How much longer? I shout over to him. Not long now, but I will need some help, he replies. The Colonel gives a nod to Stridon, who rises from his hiding place, shotgun roaring. A moment later, he's jumped clear of the Typhon's return volley, and he slams into the data pad, sending pieces of metal spinning in every direction. Guzman grabs Stridon and pushes him out of sight behind the screen. My attention is snapped back by the corridor, the thumping of booted feet. They're charging, snaps Lauren, his bolter exploding into life. The small flickers of the bolt propellant flaring into the tunnel. To my left, I glimpse Oriel, rolling out from behind the panel, auto pistol in each hand, firing into the tunnel while he rolls. As his roll takes him to his feet, he drops the pistol in his hand and sweeps the Colonel's power sword out of its scabbard. With a yell, he leaps straight at the attacking Typhons, the blue glare of the power sword reflecting off the corridor walls. Meeting the charge head on, the Inquisitor drives the blade through the stomach of the first Typhon. A spin and a backhanded slash opens up the throat of the next. The Inquisitor ducks behind the wild thrust of a bayonet, lopping off the Typhon's leg halfway up the thigh, arterial blood splashing across his coveralls. In a detached part of my brain, I watch Oriel fighting, contrasting the fluid, dance-like quality of his movements to the precise, mechanical fighting style of the Colonel. The auto pistol chatters in his right hand as he blasts another Typhon, full in the face, the power sword sweeping up to parry against the lasgun being wielded as a club, its glowing edge shearing the weapon in two. Oriel bells something that I can't quite catch over the scream of dying men, and the noise of the auto pistol, his face contorted with rage. I see a Typhon rising out of a mound of corpses behind Oriel, left arm missing below the elbow, his remaining hand clutching a bayonet. Without even thinking, I pull the trigger of the bolter, and a moment later, the guardsman's lower back explodes, his legs crumbling under him, his spine shattered. The Typhons turn and flee from the Inquisitor's wrath. The slowest pitch to the floor in two halves as Oriel strikes out once more. Las blasts flare out from the far end, kicking the corpses into jerky life again. One seems to strike Oriel full in the chest, and a blinding flash of light burns my eyes. As I blink to clear out the purple spots, I see Oriel still there, diving for cover over a pile of dead Typhons. He has the Emperor's protection, Lori says in an odd whisper. Or technology, Lauren adds, sounding just as scared. Conversion force field, the Colonel tells us as calmly as he clicks fresh bolter rounds into an empty magazine. We exchange bemused glances, none of us sure what he's talking about. Everything goes quiet again as Oriel crawls back to the door, and I can hear guardsmen chanting a sonorous liturgy behind me. Oh, Gudsman's. I can hear Gudsman's chanting a sonorous liturgy from behind me. And the fourth seal shall be raised, glory to the machine god, he intones, voice echoing off the metal walls. And the departure of the fourth seal shall be heralded by the tone of the machine god's joy. Now, if you please, Lieutenant Stryden. There's a clang of something ringing against the metal, and a hiss from a panel to my left. From somewhere above us, a high-pitched wail blares 3 times. How much longer? The Colonel shouts as Oriel hands him back his power sword, the blade dull gray now that the energy flow is switched off. 4 of the 7 seals have been lifted, Colonel Schaefer, Stryden calls back. Not long now, I gather. Here they come. They're getting desperate. Lauren draws our attention back to the corridor. The narrow tunnel seems choked with Typhons, pouring towards us, their faces masks of desperation and terror. I guess they found out what we're doing. And if they hadn't already guessed, they'll fight even harder now, battling to save their homes, friends, and families. After all, like us, we've got nothing to lose. If they fail, they're just as dead. I'd find the pointless slaughter sickening if it wasn't for the image of the pardon that lingers in the back of my mind. That and the piles of ash, which is what the men and women running towards me really are. All because some commanders have decided to dare the Emperor's wrath and fight for their glory and not his. I don't see any of them down here throwing themselves headlong at a while of firepower for their ideals. This isn't combat. They stand no chance at all. Switching the bolter to semi-auto, I send a hail of tiny rockets exploding down the accessway, punching Typhons from their feet, gouging chunks in those already dead. The guardsmen fire madly back at us, more last shots singing off the walls, then coming through the doorway. They keep coming, hurtling over the dead and the dying. They're all shouting at us, or themselves, I can't tell. It's only when the bolter starts clicking that I register the magazine is empty. I feel that detached from what's going on. My body is working on its own. This isn't a battle. It's a firing range with living targets. Most of the Typhons turn and run, and I fire into their fleeing backs, knocking them from their feet. Each roar of the bolt gun followed by a man or woman losing a life. Someone's shaking my shoulders, screaming something in my ear, but I can't hear over the whine of the siren. My brain filters the information slowly, and I feel like I'm resurfacing from a dream. Yes, there's a siren ringing around, its screeching tones echoing off the walls and the floor. We've done it, Lori's shouting in my ear. They're running for it. We've done it. Cronin's dead, I hear Stridon say, and everybody turns to look at him, leaning against the wall over Cronin. Dead? Lauren asks, clearly shocked. I'm surprised too. I hadn't spared a thought for the wounded madman while I was battling for my life. I feel a touch of sadness that he died alone and unnoticed. He was alone when he was alive. It seems disrespectful that none of us saw him die. I offered a prayer for his departing, tortured soul, hoping it wasn't too late. Internal bleeding, probably, Oriel proclaims, snapping me from my thoughts. Now it is time for us to depart as well. We have not succeeded, Gudsman whispers heavily. We're just a short way from the nearest shuttle terminal, on our way to life and freedom. But a few Typhons have decided that they're going to take us with them, forcing us to take temporary cover in a terminal alcove along the main corridor. Oriel went in the opposite direction. Who knows where he was headed? A few moments ago, the blaring siren stopped, which was a great relief to my ears and nerves. I don't need any reminders that in a short while this whole city is going to be non-existent. What do you mean? Demands Schaefer, grabbing the front of the tech priest's robe. The warning siren should not stop sounding, Gudsman says, brutalizing away the colonel's arm and pointing to the terminal. Let me go and I will find out. Everyone is staring at the tech priest as he deftly manipulates runes and dials on the terminal. His shoulders seem to sag even more, and he turns to look at us, face a picture of despondency. I am sorry I have failed, he says, slumping to the floor. I have failed to find a hidden failsafe. The reactors will not overload. Oh, frag, I muttered, dropping to my knees. Is there nothing we can do? The colonel demands, visibly shaking with anger. The coolant failsafe is located not far from here. It may be possible to dismantle it, Gudsman replies, through obviously without much hope. Which way? Snarls Schaefer, hauling the tech priest to his feet. Back towards the plasma chamber corridor to the left, marked energy distribution, he tells us. I did not think it was important. You fragging idiot, Lawrence swears, grabbing Gudsman's and slamming his back on the wall. You useless old man. Let's just get out of here, I tell them. This is the only chance of getting out of this city alive. Damn right, agrees Lori, staring at the colonel. Enough of this, snaps the colonel, dragging Lauren away from the tech priest. We have to get this failsafe deactivated. We must hurry before the Typhon guards and security realize they are in no danger. Otherwise, they will throw everything they have at us. The panic at the moment is the only thing in our favor. The mission's failed, I tell the colonel, looking at him squarely in the face. We have to get out of here. The mission cannot fail, the colonel replies, pushing Lauren away, staring straight at me. Why not? Demands Lori, hotly stepping towards the colonel. Because you say so? Don't try to stop us, warns Lauren, raising his bolter in his hands so that it's pointed at the colonel. You would not dare, Schaefer hisses the white-skinned trooper, staring straight at him. We are leaving, Lauren replies emphatically, his eyes just as hard. Court Norm must be destroyed, Schaefer exclaims, and for the first time ever I noticed a hint of desperation in his voice. I push Lauren's gun away. slightly and turn back to the colonel. Okay, tell us, I say to him quietly, standing between the colonel and the others, trying to calm things down. If some fool shoots the colonel by accident or on purpose, we'll never get out of here. Why? Why can't this mission fail? We do not have time for explanations, the colonel says between gritted teeth. I lean closer, still meeting his icy gaze. You have to tell us, I whisper in his ear, drawing his eyes to mine. He gives a sigh. If we fail, all Taifa sector will be destroyed, he tells us. He looks at our disbelieving expressions and continues. I do not know all the details. Only Inquisitor Oriel has those. He pauses. As a door slams shut further up the corridor, the Typhons are doing a room-by-room search for us. In brief, he says, casting an eye at the door, the command staff at Court Norm has fallen under an alien influence. A genestealer, in fact. Oh. A genestealer, I say, confused. You mean one of those Tyranid bastards we fought in Ikar 4? They're just shock troops, sure. They're deadly, fast, and able to rip a man in a heartbeat. But there'd have to be an army of them to stand against 700,000 guard. What's the problem? As I said, I do not fully understand this. The colonel continues, talking quickly. They are not just efficient killers, they are infiltrators too. Genestealers have some way of controlling others, some kind of mind memorism, I believe. It creates an element within the society it has infected that is sympathetic to it. They protect it, allow it to control others, building up a base of power from within. This can lead to a revolt, rebellion, and other insurgencies, as it has here. More to the point, as the power of this influence cult grows, it begins to send a sort of psychic beacon, so I am told. As an astropath might project a message across the warp, Tyranid hive fleets can detect this signal and follow it. Hive Fleet Dagon appears to have located Typhos Prime and is on its way here now. This still doesn't add up, Butson Laurie. This all seems very extreme, especially if the Tyranids are already on their way. If we were recapturing Court Norum to restore it as a command and control base, I could understand it, but we're not. What difference does it make if it's lost to the Genestealer infection or destroyed? The loss of Court Norum as an Imperial base would indeed be grievous. The colonel agrees, still speaking rapidly, but not as terrible as its secrets falling into the hands of the Tyranids. The Navy is endeavoring to stop Hive Fleet Dagon, but we have to assume it will fail. When the Hive Fleet arrives here, the Tyranids will assimilate all of the data from the base and its corrupted personnel, leaving the innermost secrets about the Imperial forces in the sector. They will find out where the Navy bases are, where worlds ready for raising Imperial Guard regiments can be found, our strategies and capabilities. Without Court Norum, the fight will be deadly enough. But if the Tyranids possess such information, they will overrun the sector much more easily. In fact, it is impossible to believe how they could be resisted at all. 500 billion people? I breathed quietly. It's a fair trade, you think? The death at Court Norum and its 3.5 million buys a better chance for the other 500 billion people living in the sector. People can be replaced, the colonel says grimly, giving us each a stern look. Habitable planets cannot. Worlds stripped by the Tyranids can never be recovered or repopulated. Another door slams shut, nearer this time. Do you think your lives are worth that? He says with sudden scorn. Is that worthy of your sacrifice? Was I wrong in giving gutterfish like you a chance to make a difference? Are you really the worthless criminals everyone thinks you are? I exchanged looks with the other last chancers, volumes spoken in that brief moment of eye contact. It's not about pardons or even saving the sector. It's about doing our duty, doing what we swore when we joined the Imperial Guard. We took an oath to protect the Emperor, his Imperium, and his servants. We may not have chosen to be last chancers, but we chose to put ourselves in danger, to be willing to sacrifice our lives in the course of our duty. Move out, barks the colonel, shouldering open the door and leaping into the corridor, bolt pistol blazing in his hand. We jump out after him and set off at a run. Typhon lasfires screaming around us. Gudsman gives a yell and pitches forward, a ragged charred hole in the back of his robe. Stridon stops to pick up the tech priest, but I grab the lieutenant's arms and pull him forward. He's dead, I tell the Navy officer when he struggles, and so was everything else and on over 50 worlds, unless we can get to that failsafe. Luckily for us, the Typhons weren't expecting us to double back. Probably they assumed we wouldn't be able to cut and run. Can't blame them. Only their commanders understand what's at stake. If any of them really know, they're totally disorganized now. An unexpected attack from within, thrown into disarray by the alarms, scattered to the shuttle ports, assaulted from the outside by the Imperial Army. The Typhon officers must be tearing their hair out by now. Gudsman's information was accurate. We come across a sign to energy distribution, and the side tunnel leads us to a chamber looking a lot like the plasma room, although quite a bit smaller, barely 4 meters across. It's filled with lots of pipes, tanks, and cables, and a dozen of gauges. Their needles flickering, red lights spread across the panels on every surface. What can we do without Gudsman's? Asks Stridon, looking meaningful at me. We all look at each other with desperation. Oh, great, says Lauren, hands flopping to his side dejectedly. We're all ready to do the right thing, and now, because that decrepit tech priest got himself killed, there's nothing we can do about it. There must be something, argues Stridon, looking around the room. We're last chancers, I say to them with a grin. If in doubt, shoot it. As I open fire on the snaking cables and pipes with the bolter, the others join in, firing at everything in sight, sparks cascading as equipment banks explode. We keep the attack up for a few seconds, a few wisps of smoke and steam hissing around us. Hey, Lori calls out, pulling something off her belt. It's the last cylinder of melta-bombs. These might come in useful. You're beautiful, I tell her, as she hands them out. I decide to put mine on a pipe that passes from the floor and through the ceiling, wider than I could wrap my arms around. Pushing the triggers, I take a couple steps back. The pipe begins to glow white. A second later, explodes into a shower of vaporized metal and plastic. I hear similar detonations. Thick, oily smoke floods the room. Panels explode with multicolored sparks, and suddenly the air is filled with a deafening scream as the sirens start sounding again. Stridon gives a delighted sigh, and Lauren is punching me in the shoulder, grinning like a fool. Time to go, the colonel orders, heading for the door. Lauren jogs out first, the rest of us following close behind. Just a short hike to the shuttle bays and we're clear. Lauren glances back and smiles. But when he steps out of the main corridor, his head explodes, splashing blood across Lori, who's right next to him. She gives a strangled scream, the droplets of blood on her face so dark against her alabaster skin. Her searing blue eyes looking like they'll pop out of their sockets. I grab her and pull her back as more lasbolts slam into the wall nearby. But she just turns and claws at my face, her nails gouging a trail across my forehead. I grimly hold on to her as she fights to get free, but she brings her knee up to me. She brings her knee up with unbelievable strength, and my groin explodes with pain, making me instinctively let go of her and collapse to the ground, clutching myself. Stridon makes a lunge for her, but a right cross to the chin sends him flying back. Stooping to grab her brother's bolter, she plunges forward, firing both guns as she charges into the corridor. She's going the wrong way, I cry out, seeing her racing left away from the shuttle pad. She will buy us extra time, the colonel says coldly, turning right at the corridor. I can still hear the roar of the bolter to my left, but there's no sign of Lori. I hesitate for a moment and push myself to my feet, about to go after her. Stridon steps in front of me and puts a hand against my shoulder. She doesn't want to live, Cage, he says, face somber. Getting yourself killed is not going to save her. I'm about to push him aside when I can hear a high-pitched scream resounding along the corridor. I can hear the colonel striding away behind me, his boots thudding on the metal floor. Stridon steps away and walks past, hurrying after the colonel. I stand there alone, straining my ears for the sound of another bolter shot. There's nothing. I realize with a start I'm the only last chancer left. I feel empty, hollow, alone in my soul, as well as physically. Lori's death seems to sum it all up. Ultimately pointless and futile. Why did I want this? Do I really think any of this will make a difference a year from now? 10 years? A century? I taste blood in my mouth and I realize I've been biting my lip, biting so hard that it's bleeding. The taste brings me back to my senses, but I'm still alive, and I owe it to them as much as to myself to survive. So that this is remembered, and whatever happens, this sacrifice and misery doesn't die with us. I turn on my heel, gripping the bolter right once more, filled with purpose again, and start jogging after Stridon. It's down here, Stridon argues, taking the turn to the left. Straight on, counters the colonel, pointing along the main corridor. I remember the map, the Navy officer insists, walking out, looking back at us. Somewhere behind us, I hear another emergency bulkhead slamming down. I guess it must be an automatic response. I can't imagine any of the Typhons hanging around long enough to close all the blast doors. Not that it'll do any good either, as far as I can tell. Another clang makes me look around. I see the last tunnel behind us to the right is sealed off now. The colonel plunges after Stridon and grabs him by the collar. A moment later, and the bulkhead closes, a wall of metal sliding down from the corridor ceiling, cutting me off from the pair of them. I stand there dazed for a moment, not quite believing they've gone. The sudden pounding of boots tears my attention back down the corridor, and I watch 7 guardsmen come running into view. None of them look in my direction, as they sprint away from me. I guess the shuttles are that way, and run after them. The constant sound of the siren is making my ears ache, a shrill tone that cuts straight into your brain. I almost run headfirst into a pair of Typhons as they come barreling out of the door to my left. I smash one of them aside, a young man with a long nose, across the jaw with the bolter. The other glances at me in confusion before I pull the trigger, the bolt tearing out his chest, the recoil almost wrenching off my arm. His round face stares at me, horrified for a moment before he slumps back against the wall. I grind the heel of my boot into the face of the first one, crushing his head against the floor, with the sound of crunching bone. The distraction means I've lost the men I was chasing, and I pause for a moment, listening for them. Walking along for a couple of minutes, I can catch the soft sound of their running from the next corridor to my left. Hurrying forward, I suddenly notice something moving out of the opposite tunnel. As I look over, my fingers go numb, and the bolter clatters to the floor. Staring straight back at me is the Genestealer. just like the ones on Icar 4. Its black eyes, set into its veined wide dome of a skull, meet mine, and there's death in that gaze. It stalks quickly toward me on its long double jointed legs, slightly hunched over. Its four upper limbs are held out for balance, the one pair tipped with bony, dagger like claws, the lower with more hand like talons that slowly unclench as it approaches. My eyes are drawn back to the alien gaze, and I feel the life leaching out of my body. They're like two pits of blackness, and I feel as if I'm falling into them. I dimly note that it's standing right in front of me now, but that seems unimportant. All that really registers are those eyes, those pits of shadow. It opens its long jaw, revealing a mass of razor sharp teeth. So, this is how I die, I dimly think to myself. It leans even closer, and I notice its tongue extending out towards me, some kind of opening, on the end widening. It's strangely beautiful, this killer. There's a sleekness about the deep blue plates of its chitin over its sinewy purple flesh. There's a perfection of purpose in the claws and fangs which I can admire. Heart of the jungle. Heart of the jungle. The thought just pops in the back of my head, and it stirs something from within me. It's like another voice prompting me to remember the feelings of an alien influence, memories of helplessness, fighting for control of myself. Icar 4. This time the memory is more vivid. Piles of bodies torn apart by the same kind of creature in front of me now. Forests stripped to bare rock, even the dirt consumed by the tyrannid swarms. A massive biotitan strides across the ruins of a water recycling facility, crushing buildings underfoot. Horrendous weapons unleashing sprays of bioacid and hails of flesh-eating grubs. Typhon sector. In an instant, my brain multiplies the horrors of Icar 4 by 50. This is what will happen. I snap out of the hypnotic trance just as the genocide's tongue brushes my throat. Frag you, I snarl, acting on instinct alone, lashing out with my fist, the knuckles of my right hand crashing against his jaw in perfect uppercut. Taken completely by surprise by the blow, the genocide stumbles backwards, clawed feet striding on the hard metal floor, scrambling for purchase before it topples over. It stays down for just a moment before springing to its feet, muscles tensing to lunge at me with a killing attack. I'm strangely calm. The wall beside us explodes in a shower of metal, and the genestealer turns and leaps away. More detonations ripple along the floor, just behind it, as it dashes for safety and then disappears with a flick of its tail through an air vent. Thanks, Colonel, I say without turning around. Not this time, Inquisitor Oriole replies, walking past me, a smoking bolt pistol in his right hand. I stopped the abomination getting out of the city, but it eluded me yet again. I almost had it this time. I'm still dazed, and the Inquisitor picks up my bolter and places it into my unfeeling hands. This will be as sure as I get, Oriole is saying, more to himself than me, I think. I will not let it get away from me again. It dies, and Corit Norum. I just nod, my body quivering with aftershock. A genestealer was 2 meters away from me, and I'm still alive. Still alive. Oriole has forgotten me, walking up the corridor towards the shattered vent, muttering to himself. The sound of nearby engines rumbling to life draws my attention back to the real world, and I start stumbling towards the shuttle pad. About 100 meters further down the corridor, I hear the whine of jets to my right. Following the noise, I come across a huge set of double doors and stumble through them. Inside are 20 or so of Typhons, fighting with each other as they try to scramble up an access ladder to one of the two shuttles on the left of the hangar. Those at the top are trying to push the others back so they can open the hatch. The rest of the vast open space is filled with scattered barrels and crates, hastily tossed out of the cargo holds to make room, by the looks of it. The air shimmers from the heat blaze and smoke left by the departing shuttles. No one is paying me any attention whatsoever. That's my shuttle, I say to myself, pulling the last of the frag grenades from my belt and tossing it to the boarding steps. The explosion hurls men to the ground, sending them tumbling down the girded metal flooring, some of them raining down in bloodied pieces. The bolter roars in my hand, shells punching into the survivors, punching them over the handrails, tearing off body parts. None of them is armed, and the execution takes only a matter of seconds. Racing up the steps, wounded men groaning as I stepped on them, I am filled with fresh vigor. Only a few minutes from freedom now, only a short journey to the rest of my life. I plunge through the hatchway and head to the cockpit. The shuttle pilot turns in his seat and shouts at me to get out. He gives a cry of alarm as I pull one of the knives from the sheaths across my chest, and he flails madly for a second, unable to fight properly within the confines of his gravity harness. His hands and arms are torn to ribbons by the blade as he tries to protect himself, a constant shriek coming from his throat. The shriek turns to a wet gurgling when I manage to find an opening and plunge the knife in. Ditching the bolter and knife onto the floor, I sit down in the pilot's seat. I look over the controls, and a doubt starts nagging at me. How the frag do you fly a shuttle? Well, I can work it out. It can't be worse than driving a Chimera, surely. If my freedom relies on working this thing out, just to fly a few kilometers, I think I can do it. I owe myself that much. I start chuckling at the irony of it. It was stowing away on a shuttle that brought me here to the Colonel and the Last Chancers in the first place. Now stealing one was going to get me out of it. Through the cockpit viewports, I see a handful of Typhons come running into the hangar, firing back to the entrance. It must be the Colonel down there, but that's his problem. There's another shuttle. He can get out on that. Those Typhons might decide to try to snatch this one off me. I don't know if I can stop them. Nope, I'm damn sure I'm not waiting for the Colonel. He promised me my pardon, my freedom, and I'm going to get it. A sudden realization hits me like a sniper's bullet. The pardon's worth frag all without the Colonel's signature and seal on it. Just like a piece of paper with meaningless words in high Gothic written on it. Oh, what the hell, I think. Everybody's going to be running around like headless sump spiders after this. Nobody's going to notice me, one guardsman about 1,000,000. Maybe the Colonel will hunt me down if he gets out, but maybe not. He might think that I'm dead, or he might give me my pardon anyway. He doesn't know if I'm here at all, deciding to help him or not. Would he blame me? No, he wouldn't. And that's the problem. Running out on him is what he expects me to do. That nasty thought, the one that's been bugging me ever since I got to this planet, rises again. Man or criminal? Worthwhile or worthless? I glance back outside and see one of the Typhons kneeling, a plasma gun held on his shoulder. The ball of energy roars out of sight, and I make my decision. Picking up the bolter and heading back down the ladder, I discover there's only 4 rounds left in the magazine, and I've got no more spares. 5 guardsmen, 4 rounds. Why can't the Emperor just cut me a fragging break and give me a full magazine? Cursing, I jump down the steps, 3 at a time. One of the Typhons catches sight of me, and I dash across the open hangar, and I veer left, diving for the cover of some metal cases, as lasbolts scream towards me. 4 rounds, 5 guardsmen. Raising the bolter to my shoulder, I look over the top of the crates. A las blast sears just past my left ear, and I pull the trigger, seeing the fiery trail of the bolt as it speeds across the hangar in a split second, tearing through one of the Typhon's shoulders, spinning him around on the decking. The next goes down to a shot about the head, and the third is only caught a glancing hit on the arm. The 3 survivors are looking rapidly between me and the entrance, when one of them is pitched off his feet by a blast to his chest. I fire the last round as they turn on the Colonel, who's charging into the hangar, power sword gleaming. Stridon follows after him, bolt pistol held in both hands, as he snaps off. Another shot, and the Typhon thrown half a dozen meters as the bolt catches him high in the chest. The last one seems to give up the fight, shoulders drooping as the Colonel rams a meter of powered blade through his midriff. I burst from cover and give a shout. Stryden almost shoots me, but pulls himself short just before firing. Cage? Says the colonel, noticing me as I leg it across towards them. I thought it was Inquisitor Oriel helping us. Never keep a good man down, I tell him. As he turns to look at me, I'm shocked to see his left arm stops just above the elbow. A charred mess. I've never seen the colonel hurt in battle before. Not even the tiniest scratch. And now he's missing an arm. That scares me, and I'm not sure why. I guess I thought he was invincible. I think I'm more bothered by it than he is. His icy gaze flicks around the chamber, checking for enemies. He doesn't seem to have noticed he's got an arm missing. A devil in a man's body, I once called Schaefer. I'm reminded of that fact looking at him, standing there with one arm, as alert and poised as ever. Plasma blast, he explains, following my gaze. We clamber hurriedly up the boarding ladder of the nearest shuttle. I'm about to get in after the two when I see it when I hear a shout from behind. Turning, I see Inquisitor Oriel racing towards the hangar towards us. She's all ready to go, Stryden calls from inside. Oriel bounds up the steps, but I step into his path as he ducks to get in the shuttle. What's the meaning of this, Lieutenant? He demands, straightening up. How did a gin stealer get here? Months or years of travel from the nearest hive fleet, I tell him. All the pieces finally beginning to fall into place. I am an agent of the Emperor's Holy Orders of the Inquisition, he snarls at me. I could kill you for this obstruction. You didn't answer my question, I tell him, folding my arms. I'm right. And this has a lot to answer for. And this man has a lot to answer for. Stand aside, he bellows, making a lunge for me. I sidestep and smash my knee into his stomach, forcing him to his knees. He looks up at me, aghast, surprised I've got the guts to strike him. Luckily, he wasn't expecting it. I don't think I could have laid a finger on him otherwise. You said you wouldn't let it get away from you again, I say to him, as he kneels there wheezing. You let it escape, didn't you? Frag. You might have brought it in here with you for all I know. You don't understand, he gasps, forcing himself to his feet. I was fortunate, that's all. He makes a grab at the holster hanging from his belt, but finds it empty. You looking for this? I ask, holding up the bolt pistol, which I grabbed when I need him in the guts. 4,000 dead last chancers. Unfortunate. 3.5 million dead Typhons. Unfortunate. 1 million guardsmen from across the sector. Unfortunate. Risking 50 worlds? Unfortunate. You could never understand, he snaps, stepping back a pace. To defeat the Tyranids, we must study them. There's more than a few million people at stake here. More than 50 worlds. The whole of the Imperium of mankind could be wiped out by these beasts. They must be stopped at any cost. I guess that is pretty unfortunate too, I add, ramming the grip of the bolt pistol into his chin. Tumbling him down the steps, I step backwards through the hatch and pull it shut, cycling the lock wheel. Let's go, I call out to Stryden. I strap myself next to the colonel. The engines flared alive, lifting us off the ground. I'm slammed back into the bench as Stryden hits the thrusters in the full. The shuttle speeding from the dock like a bullet from a gun. We pass through a short tunnel, jarring against the wall occasionally, under Stryden's inexpert piloting, before screaming into a bright yellow daylight, blinding after all the glow strips the past few days. I look back and see Court Norum stretching out behind me, built into the mountains, almost 50 kilometers across. A bright ball of orange begins to spread out behind us, a raging maelstrom of energy, surrounded by flickering arcs of electricity. Two others erupt just after, forming a triangle until their blasts merge. The immense plasma ball expands rapidly, hurling stone and metal into the sky before incinerating it. For a moment, I think I see a black fleck racing before the plasma storm. But it may be my imagination. Then again, there was another shuttle in the bay. Mountains topple under the blast, and I can think of the pile of ash that'll be left. A pile of ash worth 3.5 million lives because someone made a mistake. My thoughts are drawn back to my own survival as I see a howling gale hurling rock and dust towards us. Faster, I bellow to Stryden as the shockwave crashes through the air. The ground's being ripped by the invisible force, rock splinters into fragments, and the high walls exploding to millions of shards. With a final convulsive spasm, the plasma engulfs everything. The light sears my face. The boom of the explosion reaches my ears, just as the shuttle is lifted up bodily by the shockwave, hurled towards the clouds. The hull rattles deafeningly from debris impacts, the metal shrieking under the torment of the unnatural storm, bouncing us up and down in our seats. I hear Stryden laughing in his high-pitched way from up front, but I'm more concerned with my heaving guts as we're spinning and pitched and rolled around by the blast. As it passes, and as the passage begins to smooth, I hear this strange noise and turn to look at the colonel. He's laughing, a deep chuckle. He sat there, one arm ending, and a ragged stump, disheveled and covered in the blood and guts of others. And he's laughing. He looks at me, his eyes glinting. How does it feel to be a hero, Cage? He asks. The colonel waves away, the orderly fussing over his arm, with an irritated gesture. I stand there impatiently, waiting to get my hands on the pardon. We're back in the Court Norum Commissariat relay post, where we were told about our final mission. The door behind me creaks open, and Schaefer's personal scribe, Clericus Amadale, walks in, the hem of his brown robes flowing across the floor. There's someone else with him, a young man, his face tattooed with the skull and cog of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Amadale has the bundle of pardons in his arms, while a tech adept is carrying some piece of bizarre equipment that looks like a cross between a las pistol and a spider. Here are the documents, Colonel, Amadale says slowly, placing them, one at a time, on the bare wooden desk in front of Schaefer. I restrain myself, waiting to grab the whole bunch of mine. The colonel, deliberately making this point, signs the pardons of the others, Franks, Cronin, Laurie, Lauren, and Gudsman's. Pardons for dead people. Keeping the alive waiting. He works slowly and methodically, the clericus holding the parchments for him while he signs them with his good arm. Amadale passes a lighted red candle, and with the same infuriating slowness dribbles a hot blob of wax into the parchments, while the colonel then seals with a stamp produced from the scribe's sleeve. Eventually, perhaps a lifetime later, the colonel pulls mine forward. There are a number of conditions attached to the continuing application of this pardon, Cage, he tells me sternly, finally looking up at me. Yes, I ask, suspicious of what the colonel might do next. I didn't think he was the type of person who would try to wriggle out of something. He has some honor, that much I'm sure. First, you are to discuss no details of the Last Chancer's activities in Court Norum with anyone unless specifically ordered by myself or a member of His Holy Emperor's Inquisition, he says, gravely counting the point off with a raised finger. Forget this ever happened, right, sir? I confirm. That is correct, he replies with a nod. We were never here. A malfunction in Court Norum's reactors caused the Citadel's destruction, an act of the Emperor. I understand, I assured him. I've been expecting something like this ever since the shuttle landed and we were bundled into another one of those black painted commissar armored cars. Second, he raised another finger. You are on parole. The pardon is revoked if you ever transgress any imperial law. Should you remain with the Imperial Guard, any article of the Imperial Guard Code and laws of conduct, he says as if reading it out from the script inside his head. I'll keep my nose clean, sir, I tell him with a sincere nod. I doubt that, he says suddenly with a lopsided smirk, mentally throwing me off balance. That was almost a joke. Just make sure you do not get caught doing anything serious. Don't fret, Colonel, I tell him with a feeling. As much as I've enjoyed your company, I never want to see your face again. Those are the conditions, he concludes, scribbling his signature on the scroll and whacking down the seal. With a casual gesture, he offers it to me. I reach out cautiously, half suspecting him to pull it away at the last moment, laughing cruelly. I'm afraid to say that I snatch it from his grasp, eagerly reading the words. Freedom, pardoned of all crimes. Freedom. What will you do now, Cage? He asks, leaning back in the rickety wooden chair, making the back creak under his weight. Stay in the guard, sir, I tell him instantly. I've been thinking about it on the bumpy half-hour shuttle run. More to take my mind off Striden's poor flying than anything else. We had a ditch eventually when another storm broke. He raised a questioning eyebrow, and I explained. I joined the Imperial Guard to fight for the Emperor. I swore an oath to defend his realms. I aim to keep that oath. Very well, the colonel says with an approving nod. Your final rank of lieutenant will be transferred to whatever regiment you end up joining. There are quite a few here to choose from, but I recommend you stay away from the Mordians. I will, I say empathetically. I kind of like the uniforms of the Torbarian Rangers, so maybe I'll see if they'll take me. Notify Clericus Amadeo as soon as you have made your choice. He will ensure any necessary paperwork is in order, the colonel says, nodding in the scribe's direction. Amadeo looks at me with his fixed, blank expression. There is one other thing, the colonel adds as I'm about to turn to the door. He beckons the tech adept forward with a finger. I can remove your penal legion tattoo, he says, raising the peculiar gadget as if an explanation. I roll up my sleeve and look at my shoulder, barely making out the skull and cross swords emblem. Above the badge, you can just make out 13th Penal Legion, and underneath, I know it's written 143889 Cage N. I know you can't see it now, past the scar tissue. I'll keep it, I announce, letting my shirt sleeve drop down again. Keep it? Amadeo stutters, unable to stop himself. To remember, I add, and the colonel nods in understanding. The memory of 4,000 dead is etched into my brain. It makes a strange kind of sense that it's tattooed over my skin as well. We don't exchange another word as I salute, turn on my heel, and march out, hand gripping the pardon so tightly that my knuckles are going white. Outside the bunker, the two provosts click their heels to attention as I walk beside them and studiously ignore them. A day ago, they would have shot me, given the slightest chance or reason. As I pick my way across the shell-hole-pocked mud, I glance back and see the colonel emerge. A sudden whine of engines and a downblast of air heralds the arrival of some kind of stratocraft, long, sleek, jet black, no insignia at all. A door hisses open on the side, and 3 men jump out, swathed in dark red cloaks that flap madly in the downwash of the craft's engines. And the colonel nods in greeting. The 4 of them climb back in again. With a whoosh, it accelerates back into the clouds, again in less than 10 seconds. That's the last I'll see of him. He's probably already planning the first suicide mission for the next bunch of poor bastards to be called the last chancers. The empty bottle smashes as I casually drop it to the floor, the shards of pottery mixing with the glass and ceramic of the four other bottles that preceded it. I'm drunk, very drunk. I hadn't had a drink in 3 years, and the first glass went straight to my head, the second to my legs, and the rest has gone, well, Emperor knows well where. That's how it's been for the past 2 months. Every night in the officers' mess, crawling back to my bunk when they throw me out. I'm out on Glacius Formatus, back on garrison duty again, with the Trebarans and Typhons for company. I still don't really know anyone. I've spent every night here drinking my pay away, trying to forget the past 3 years, but it isn't easy. Parades and drills are so dull, my mind wanders back to Deliverance, to Proxima Finalis, to False Hope, and all the other places I fought, and my comrades died in their hundreds. I swill the Typhon wine around the silver goblet for a while, pretending that I could smell its delicate bouquet through the smoke of the ragweed cigar jammed in the corner of my mouth. Gazing at the 1,000 candles hanging from the dozen vast chandeliers that light the marble hall with their flickering glows, I wonder if there's a candle there for each dead last chancer. The mess seems filled with Typhons today, giving me surly looks like they know something, but they can't, I'm sure of it. We won a great victory at Court Norum. We won the war, and preparations have begun to receive High Fleet Dagon, which is why we're stuck out here for the moment. A great victory, but no one else seems to be celebrating. Everyone in the mess is somber. I don't know what they've got to be unhappy about. Having to eat fine meat, dining on fresh vegetables, drinking, whoring, gambling, and wasting their lives instead of fighting. I guess that's why I haven't fitted in. Because I've begun to miss combat. Shouting orders at a bunch of uniformed trolls as they march up and down the parade ground is no substitute for crawling about in the mud and blood, kill or be killed situations that bring you to life. Miserable bastards. Don't they know we've just won a war? Everyone else's grim mood has brought me further down. I think about the other last chancers, the dead ones, the ones who got the pardon too late. 3,999 of them, all dead, except me. I start to wonder why I'm alive and why they're not. What makes me special? Was I just lucky? Have I been set aside from harm by the Emperor? I'm tempted to think the latter, which is why I joined up again. Pay him back for watching over me for the past 3 years. Emperor, I wish these Typhons would cheer up, the miserable fraggers. What did you say? A man demands from towards the bar, 3 meters to my right. He's decked out in blue and white, the Typhon colors. Gold braiding hangs across the left breast. A cupboard full of medals adorning his right. A colonel, I reckoned. I must have spoken out loud. What? I mumbled back, unable to recall what I was thinking, trying to drag my brain out of the drink-filled murk. You called me a miserable fragger, he accuses, stepping through the haze of ragweed smoke to stand on the other side of the small round table. I sit back, letting my elbows slide off the table and peer back at him. We've just saved the fragging sector and everyone's moping around like their sisters died. I say as two more Typhons, both majors or captains by the uniform, step up behind him. I have to leave my wife and go to some bastard slime pit in the middle of nowhere. The one to the left stabs a finger at me. Some froth from his ale still stuck to his huge, drooping mustaches. What's to be happy about? Welcome to the fragging Imperial Guard, I say, shrugging my shoulders and knocking back the last glass of wine. I tried to get up, but the first one, a bald middle-aged one, thrust me back into the bench with a gnarled hand on my shoulder. As I thud back into place, one of them pulls my pardon from where it's been jolted out of one of the chest pockets of my jacket. I always keep it there, a good luck talisman. The stub of the cigar drops into my lap, and I brush it to the floor. What's this? Penal Legion scum, he hisses, looking at what's written on the parchment. Not anymore. I am a proper officer now, I tell them, still half baked from the wine. Look, I'm sitting around on my fat ass doing nothing, shouting at troopers and pretending to jump a lass from the local town, and trying to jump a lass from the local town. I must be an officer. Okay, I get what he's saying now. Not anymore. I'm a proper officer now, I tell them, still half baked from the wine. Look, I'm sitting around on my fat ass, doing nothing, shouting at the troopers and trying to jump a lass from the local town. I must be an officer. You should be hanged. Big Mustache adds, looking over his comrade's shoulder. You're a disgrace to the Imperial Guard. You'd all be dead if it wasn't for us, I mumbled back. Should thank me. Ungrateful bastards. You think so? The third one demands, his piggy nose thrust into his face. You're nothing. You're scum. You should all be killed, Baldy declares, face bright red now. We were, I snarl back, sickened by their attitude. They were fragging heroes. You part-time soldiers don't even deserve to lick their boots. You traitorous filth, Pignose bellows, pulling an ornate sword from its scabbard and waving it at me. Something inside me snaps, looking at these prissy, pompous, spoiled, officer-class, weevil-brained snobs. A feeling I haven't felt since Court Norms surges through me, a feeling of energy and vitality, of being alive, infusing me with strength and power. I'm a man, a soldier, I scream at them, hauling myself to my feet. They were all soldiers, real men and women, not scum. Pignose makes a clumsy swipe with the sword, but he's too close and I grab it and twist his wrist. I trap the basket hilt in my left hand and twist, wrenching it easily from his grasp, as easily as taking sweetmeats from a babe. You want it rough? I shriek, slamming the hilt into his pig nose, causing blood to cascade over the white breast of his tunic. They begin to back away. I hear murmurs from around the room. Your guard, can't you fight me? What did you get those medals for? Polishing? Shouting? Fight me, damn you. I take another step forward, lashing out with the hilt, and at the big man's stomach, doubling him over. They stumble away again, eyes darting around, looking for the trooper that's going to fight for them. No one else to fight this battle, I snarl. You have to get bloody and dirty now. There's a clamor, and all around, people scramble for the doors. Chairs and tables are overturned as people back off from the madman screaming and waving a sword around. This is the closest half of them have ever been to a fight. The alcohol mixes with my anger to fuel me with a bloodlust. A red mist descends from my eyes, and I keep seeing little pieces of ashes, faceless strangers clawing at me for my dreams, men cut and blown apart. My head whirls, and I feel dizzy. It's like 4,000 voices are crying out for blood in my head. 4,000 men and women crying to be remembered, asking for vengeance. This is for Franks, I shout out, plunging the sword into Pignose's guts. The others try to grab me, but I lunge back at them, slashing and hacking with the sword. For Polowicz, Gudsmans, Gappo, Kyle, Alice, Denzel, Harlan, Lauren, Jordan, Mallory, Donaldson, Fredericks, Broker, Rosalind, Slavini, Cronin, Ligskrug. The litany of names spills from my lips as I carve the three arrogant Typhons to pieces, hacking into their inert bodies, blood splashing across the light blue carpet to create a purple puddle. With each stroke, I picture a death, All the ones that I saw die, they're stored up there in my head, and it seems like they want out. For fragging all of them. For Lori. For Lauren. I finish. Leaving the saber, jutting out of the chest of Pignose. People are shouting and grabbing at me. Someone's throwing up to my right. The coward. But I push them away, remembering at the last second to turn back and snatch the pardon from Baldy's dead fingers. I stumble out the door and start running into the streets, the rain cascading off my bloodied hands as I stuff the pardon back in my pocket. I wake with a banging in my head loud enough to be all the forges of Mars. My throat feels as if several small mammals have nestled in it for a year, and my limbs feel weak. With a hazy recollection, the events of the night before come back to me. I can feel the Typhon's dried blood caked on my hands. I really should try to control my temper. My next instinct is to check that I have my pardon. I fumble in my pocket, and my heart leaps to my throat when I find it empty. Just then, I hear a tearing noise and force my eyes open. Someone stood over me, where I'm collapsed against the alley wall. The sun reflects off a window behind him, so he's hidden in the shadow. Squinting in the light, all I can see are two pinpricks of glittering blue, two pieces of flashing ice. He drops something, and I can see my pardon, torn in two pieces, fluttering on the wet ground. He pulls a bolt pistol from his belt and points it at my face. The first thing that pops in my mind is, what the hell is he doing here? The second is, how in all that's holy did he get his arm back? I knew you would come back to me, Cage. The colonel purrs savagely. You are one of mine. You always will be. I can kill you now, or I can give you one last chance.